This channel is for educational purposes only. Please do your own due diligence before making any investment decisions. Hi, this is Rabil with Invest Like a Pro. I had two questions from paid subscribers on my research that both asked they were slightly different questions, but both related to a stock, SLP Simulations Plus. So what I want to do is, I think we can all learn from this. So I figured it would be worth doing a video on. So I'm going to bring up the chart and we're going to go through this. And what I want to do, so there's two parts to there's two different questions here. One is whether this is an entry on the daily and using the criteria, looking at ADX and MACD and the price action. And then secondly, how do you manage a position where you're basically turning the trend around? Like how do you handle resistance is the real question. And it's a question related to position trade management, really, and navigating through resistance levels. So what I want to do is I'm gonna just go through and give everything that I'm looking at, starting with the monthly chart and then working our way down to a daily. The hourly isn't as relevant on this on these questions, but I think the monthly is. So we've got this pattern where we've spent, I would say, over a year working our way down and consolidating, and we're just getting through the 18-month. If you notice, that 18-month is still declining. Now, the MACD has come right down to the zero line, and we have low ADX. So we have this in a pretty strong position when you look at it that way. The one missing component here is the fact that the 18-month is declining. So that's not a small thing, and it would be hard for this stock to make any kind of dramatic move with a declining 18 months. So I'd be more inclined to believe that, yeah, it could carry a little bit, but at some point we're going to get some kind of a little mini retracement, even a couple bars or something like that, sometime coming up here. Now, that's just the backdrop. That's not going to keep me from taking this trade. We're through the 18-month line. We do have this resistance level from this prior peak, but that's going to show up on the weekly. But we're in a pretty good position overall when you look at the momentum conditions on the monthly chart. When we look at the weekly, so the question you have to ask yourself as to whether this is a trade or not is you have to decide. There are two patterns that I use to enter a stock. Okay, one is I've got strong ADX. So here's a 25 line in ADX. I got a strong ADX, and it made a peak with price. And here's the 18 in price, and the stock's moving up and is pulling back after a strong reading. Now, this ADX can drop down below 25. Sometimes it holds above 25, which is really strong. But as this is pulling back towards the 18 MA in that zone, that is the pullback trade. Okay, that is, and I'm not looking at MACD yet because I'm going to have that help me with the timing, but this is kind of the criteria I'm looking for. New high here. I want the MACD to hit a new high with price as well, but we get this pullback. We have a strong ADX reading. So that's one trade. That's the pullback trade. The other trade is we've got a sideways line, been going sideways, and we're bumping our heads up against a resistance level. And actually, let me just show you this. So we've got this channel going sideways, and then we've got an ADX that is below 25. Okay, preferably not wiggling like that. I mean, we'd rather have more of like a quiet line. This shows volatility in the line. I would prefer to have it be a little bit more quiet and be below both the DI lines while this is going sideways and forming this line and bumping its head against a resistance level. So if we go back and look at where SLP is right now, look at the weekly chart. It's been bumping its head. Well, it bumped its head up on here once. It did it actually back here prior to that, and then it didn't quite make it the last time. So, but when I'm looking at this chart, I'm kind of leaning towards this being the resistance zone right up here, somewhere, 58, 59, something like that. And I'm seeing a low ADX pattern. I'm seeing improving MACD. I mean, this overall pattern looks pretty good, especially when you put it in the context of what the market's been doing. This is pretty impressive. So this would not prevent me from doing this, but just keep in mind, we do have some resistance up there, maybe call it like 59.60. So I've got a low ADX condition and a basing pattern working sideways on the weekly chart. And on the daily chart, I've got newfound momentum. We had a low ADX condition in place when we look at this period right here. We spent a decent amount of time with ADX below, and in fact, all three lines below for a period of time. And we formed a sideways line. So I can draw this horizontal line here. So when we broke out in price, ADX got back above 25, and then on the pullback, this higher pivot low, we basically came down, tested the low, and now we're turning up from that. I actually think the close on Friday would have been considered an entry point in this trade. Now, just realize what I'm looking at. There's a couple really key things to think about here. Number one, we know that based on the monthly chart, there's going to be a pullback coming. Okay, I mean, it could move up. Maybe this wants to go through that resistance and get up into the low to mid 60s before we get a pullback. But I would say we're not going to go through a full-fledged uptrend in the position this is in without some kind of a pause or a pullback. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind. The second thing is we have overhead resistance right above where we're trying to enter. So if we're getting in at 56, we know in a couple points we've got some resistance. So the only way I'm taking this trade is as a probe trade, meaning I know that we haven't broken out yet, and I'm going to take this and see how it reacts there. So I might have a money management strategy or trade management strategy that's a little bit more aggressive with this. So let's say I take this trade right here and it rallies up to 59. What I might do is take a small piece off and then go to a break even or raise this up enough so that the whole position would be a break even. And that way, if the stock turns on a dime and comes right back down, gets hammered after failing at resistance, I'm out of the trade. I don't play that. Now, if it gets through and then pulls back, so let's just say it gets through this resistance level here and then gives us that pullback that I was talking about. You could actually get ready for a weekly trade, which would be a monthly-weekly combination that would be much more significant. And you could play that off the daily as well, knowing that you probably have more upside potential. So if I'm going to take this trade right here, I'm going to use this as my stop, and I'm trying to get a quick target out of it. I'm playing it aggressively because I know I haven't broken out yet. And I still have pretty good overhead resistance in place. So that's really the only way I would be willing to play this. It's pretty aggressive, but look at the volume action. The ADX is good. A nice pattern in the MACD. Even the hourly chart has a pretty good look to it. Sideways consolidation pattern with low ADX, and now we're turning at the zero line with a reverse divergence. So there's a lot of positives in the short term, but right now I would be playing it off the daily chart for a trade and probably trading it aggressively, taking targets, and then watching for the next pullback. I think after we break out and pull back, that is truly where you get all of the time frames in sync and have a confluence that we have a big move coming. Right now, I think we have a move coming, but I don't know that it's a big move yet until we get this in a little bit stronger position. So I hope this helps everyone out in understanding how I'm using 4 different time frames to kind of frame out a trade. Be willing to play in this position, even though it hasn't broken out yet, because I'm going to play with tighter risk. And this is an aggressive trade in a bear market, just so you know. I mean, I don't know that it's the highest probability pattern right underneath, buying this kind of pattern right underneath resistance. But the quality of the look based on the ADX and the MACD in both time frames and the volume action is definitely very, very good. So I would be willing to do maybe smaller size and play it and then see how it plays out, see how it gets through, and then look to buy the first legitimate pullback after the breakout on the weekly chart. And it could be an opposing trend trigger on the daily that gets you in on that weekly, you could play it a 2 time frame that way if you want. So anyway, there's going to be I think a lot of potential in this if it can get through that 58, 59 area. So hopefully this is helpful, letting you guys understand or seeing how I would go through and analyze a particular setup and how I'd go about using one of the two trades. Either it's a pullback trade or it's a breakout trade. Right now, it's only a breakout trade on the daily chart. It's not a breakout on the weekly. So I have to play it off the daily. And then if we get a pullback, it could be a pullback trade off on the weekly chart, and you use the daily chart to enter. All right. Go ahead and post any questions or comments, and we'll see you next time.